In this first part of the video course, we've covered a couple of modules. The first module was an introduction to networks. What's the purpose of a network? What are some of the components of a network? For example, switches and routers. What kind of media might we use to interconnect these network components? Maybe unshielded twisted pair, maybe fiber optics. We discussed the distinction between multi-mode and single-mode fiber optics. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about how we could categorize networks. We could categorize networks based on how they're interconnected. Is it a star? Is it a bus? Is it a ring? Or how geographically dispersed they are, such as, is this a LAN? Is this a WAN? Or we could say, is this a peer-to-peer network or a client-server network? We discussed a variety of categories of networks. Then, in our second module, we identified a couple of reference models. These reference models allow us to take a protocol, a technology, a network device, and see how it interrelates with another network device or protocol or technology. By having a standardized reference model, or in our case, we looked at a couple of models, network professionals can communicate more effectively about what they're working on. They can say, this is a layer 2 device, so we know this is something like a switch. It can make forwarding decisions maybe based on layer 2, maybe based on MAC address information. And we took a look at two different models. The ISO, the International Standards Organization, developed the OSI, the Open Systems Interconnect model, with its 7 layers. And then we had a model developed by the United States Department of Defense, and that was the DoD model, also known as the TCP/IP stack. It only had 4 layers, and a lot of people would argue that that's a better fit for most of today's networks because it's IP-centric. The OSI model was more generalized. It could encompass IP, IPX, AppleTalk, DECnet, Banyan Vines, a variety of things that would plug into that model. But the TCP/IP model was much more IP-focused. And honestly, that's probably what we're running on our networks today. Maybe IP version 4, maybe IP version 6, but it's probably an IP-centric network. And by having this simplified model, in many cases, it makes it a lot easier to categorize a network component into one of the 4 layers as opposed to one of the OSI model's 7 layers. And with these network fundamentals now under our belt, we're ready to move in to part 2. In part 2, we're going to start seeing how to configure some of these network devices that we've been talking about in theory.